All right, coming off your recent look at the historical foundations of medical microbiology and the germ theory, we're going to pivot just a bit. Today, we're exploring how we actually classify and track all those disease-causing microorganisms we just learned about. Because, as future healthcare professionals, understanding the rules of how life is organized is honestly just as important as understanding how it functions.
So let's start with a crucial question to set the stakes for this material. What actually happens in a clinical setting when a diagnostic pathogen is misidentified? Well, the short answer is absolutely nothing good. Messing up these classifications is literally the clinical equivalent of misspelling a patient's ID badge. You're looking at charting errors, a total loss of tracking, and potentially prescribing the completely wrong treatment for a severe infection. Not great, right?
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap and see exactly how we organize the microscopic world to avoid those catastrophic errors. We'll be looking at taxonomy as our clinical standard, exploring the taxonomic mailing address, mastering binomial nomenclature, and finally, mapping out evolutionary relationships.
Section 1. Taxonomy as the clinical standard. We're building on the framework established by Carl von Linné. To solve the whole problem of identifying pathogens, we first need to understand this historical framework, since it really laid the foundation for how we scientifically communicate about life.
So the crucial takeaway here is that taxonomy isn't just some kind of academic pedantry. It's a highly structured, absolutely mandatory system for categorizing life. Whenever you're dealing with living organisms or even acellular entities like viruses, taxonomy provides the formal rules of engagement. Without this system, global medical data would just be a chaotic mess of local nicknames and super confusing descriptions.
Taxonomy actually breaks down into three interconnected branches that operate in real time. First, you have classification, which is the orderly, hierarchical arrangement of organisms into groups based on shared traits. Then, there's nomenclature, the precise process of assigning standardized names. And lastly, identification, which is the hands-on clinical process of isolating an unknown microbial specimen and recording its specific traits so it can be accurately placed right into that established scheme.
Moving on to Section 2, the taxonomic mailing address. Going from the massive evolutionary scale right down to the hyper-specific clinical level, let's see how this classification builds systematically, using an analogy I think we're all pretty familiar with. It really helps to frame the entire global classification hierarchy as a giant mailing address, moving from the most expansive domain all the way down to the exact species. Think of the domain as the country of destination. Then you drill down sequentially, right? Kingdom is the state, phylum and class act as the city and zip code, order and family are the neighborhood and street, genus represents the specific apartment building block, and the species rank, well, that's the exact individual name written on the envelope inside that specific mailbox. Because these ranks are strictly nested, knowing a microbe's specific neighborhood gives you total predictability about the broader city and state it resides in. Think about it. If two organisms share the same family rank, they absolutely must belong to the exact same higher categories, like order, class, phylum, and domain. I mean, you can't live on the exact same taxonomic street but belong to two entirely different countries. It just doesn't work that way.
All right, Section 3. Mastering binomial nomenclature, the standardized two-name system for universal recognition. Now that we know how to navigate the taxonomic map, let's zoom in on that exact individual name on the envelope, a naming convention you're going to utilize every single day in your medical charting.
This two-name binomial system ensures that healthcare professionals around the entire world are speaking the exact same diagnostic language. It doesn't matter if you're treating a patient in Tokyo, London, or New York. The unique scientific name for a distinct organism remains universally recognized, totally bypassing any language barriers or confusing regional common names.
And guys, precision really matters here. Adhering to mandatory typography rules is the true clinical standard. A mistake, like using a lowercase genus or a capitalized species, could cause a massive tracking error in digital medical records. Remember, typing out these names is legally identical to putting a patient's formal name on their chart. It has to be perfect.
So here's your checklist for formatting, and honestly, it's non-negotiable. The genus is the first word, and it's always capitalized. The species is the second word, and it must be entirely lowercase. Plus, if you're typing the text into a computer, both names must be explicitly italicized. If you happen to be handwriting notes on a physical chart, you've got to completely underline the text to maintain that scientific formatting.
Now we know healthcare is super fast-paced, so once you've written the legal first and last name fully in a medical document, you can actually save time by adopting a standard abbreviation protocol. For example, Staphylococcus aureus can be legally abbreviated to S. osseus, just using the capitalized initial of the genus followed by a period and the full species name. But remember the golden rule here. This is only allowed after the first full use.
Okay, Section 4. Mapping evolutionary relationships. Uncovering the natural history between distinct groups of organisms. For our final section, we're shifting from how we name these organisms to how we uncover their deep historical connections. Because ultimately, understanding where a pathogen came from really helps us understand how it functions today.
This brings us to phylogeny, which basically allows us to step back and look at the massive evolutionary family tree connecting all these different biological domains. It's not just about categorizing things for the sake of convenience. It's about studying the actual natural, structural, and genetic relatedness between groups of living organisms throughout history.
Notice the paradigm shift we've had here. We evolved from the traditional Whitaker five-kingdom system, which relied heavily on visible structural morphology and nutritional lifestyles, basically grouping things by what they looked like and how they ate. But as we know, appearances can be super deceiving. So we shifted to the modern Woese-Fox framework, which is built entirely on precise molecular RNA sequencing. It's a real game changer.
This ribosomal RNA analysis revealed 3 distinct genetic domains right at the very top of our taxonomic mailing address. We've got domain bacteria, which holds the classic prokaryotes with traditional cell walls. Then there's domain Archaea, the extreme environment prokaryotes. And finally, domain Eukarya, the complex eukaryotic organisms with a true membrane-bound nucleus. And yes, that includes us humans.
Let's focus briefly on Archaea. These are highly specialized unicellular entities that somehow survive in conditions that would instantly destroy standard bacteria. Because they live in extreme niches, like insanely high salinity or intense heat, and because they're single-celled organisms lacking a nucleus, older classification models just assumed they were related to standard bacteria.
But here is where it gets truly mind-bending. The genetic reality uncovered by modern RNA sequencing is just wild. Let this sink in for a second. These extreme prokaryotic microbes are actually closer molecular cousins to you and me than they are to common bacteria like E. coli. They actually share more structural DNA and protein synthesis sequences with domain Eukarya than they do with domain bacteria. No way, right?
This incredible genetic twist perfectly sets the stage for your next lecture, leaving us to really wonder, how did life evolve into such vastly different forms from a shared ancestral root? I mean, if we're that closely tied to extreme microscopic organisms, what exactly caused that massive split? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you move on to explore the evolutionary origins and diversification of microorganisms next. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.